everyone, welcome to another edition of 2A Arsenal Roundup News. My name is Richard Espinoza, I'm your host. We are your primary source for Second Amendment news, whether it be good, bad, or ugly, whether it be in blue states, red states, or any part of the United States. We keep you informed on important Second Amendment legislation that you need to know about. Well, today, and if you like my videos, and if you have watched my previous videos, please give me a like. It's important that you do, because I want to get as many subscribers as possible so I can continue doing the work that I'm doing, so I can bring you news that matters the most. Well, today I'm going to be talking about a subject that's kind of difficult for me to talk about, but I have to do it. And some of you may know, or some of you may not know, that the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi, they are proposing a ban on transgender people owning firearms. Now, before I begin, let me say that I am a gun rights advocate and I'm a gun rights activist. My belief is that everybody should have a right to own a firearm, regardless of race, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of sexual preference, sexual orientation. Doesn't matter. As long as you're a law-abiding citizen, as long as you're an American, and yes, even gay people are Americans, even transgender people are Americans. As long as they are American citizens and they apply by the law, then they should have a right to own a firearm. I believe that all law-abiding citizens should have firearms. We should only disallow violent felons, people who commit rape, people who commit bank robberies, or carjackings. They should be discluded because they forfeited their rights. When you commit a felony, you have forfeited your rights. Now, tax evasion should not count. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, tax evasion shouldn't be a felony. It should be a misdemeanor, in my opinion. Unfortunately, the ATF and all the Washington bureaucrats also want to take gun rights away from people who committed tax evasion. What harm is tax evasion? It's not like the government has cheated people out of money before, but it's not okay for you to cheat money, but it's okay for them. But that's another story. However, this proposal on denying transgender people their right to own firearms was in the wake of the recent transgender shooters. One is with Audrey Hale, who committed the shootings in Tennessee at a Christian school. And then the most recent, Robin Westman, who committed that shooting at a Catholic school in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now, I do have some mixed emotions about that, about wanting to take guns away from people simply because they're transgender. Now, let me break it down. Gun Owners of America has proposed this. They say, based on an argument that was made by Eric Pratt of Gun Owners of America, as well as Aiden Johnson, that discrimination is simply discrimination. When you're denying a transgender person a right to own a gun, or a gay person to own a gun, it's just pure discrimination. It just wouldn't be fair. Keep in mind, there was a time in America when it was illegal for blacks to own guns, which is wrong, and I totally agree. I'm not going to say whether if I agree with the Department of Justice on wanting to ban transgender people, but I will say this though. I question the Democrats that support transgender rights. Are they going to stand up for transgender people's Second Amendment rights? Are they? These are the same people who support transgender rights, but they're against your Second Amendment rights. And then you have many Democrat gay liberals who are gay, who are bent on hell on destruction, on getting rid of your Second Amendment rights. But are they going to wake up and say, hey, wait a minute, that's discrimination? Now, let's say that it becomes the law. Let's say, for argument's sake, and I'm just doing this for argument's sake. For argument's sake, let's say if the law is intact, the law has been passed, it's now against the law for transgender people to own guns. Let's say that if it was the law. Then how would the Democrat left react to that? How would they? So I'm playing the devil's advocate on that. How would they react? How would they? That's the question. Now, I can play the devil's advocate of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. She can make the argument saying, transgender people are safe with guns, but white people are not. She would probably make that argument. Just saying. Or you would have somebody like Elizabeth Warren saying, well, transgender people are always being targeted, so they should have a right with having a gun. They can be trusted with gun. It's those racist white people that shouldn't have guns. That would probably be their reaction. Just saying. But as a gun rights advocate and a steward to the Constitution and an activist, nobody should be discriminated against when it comes to the Second Amendment rights, because the Second Amendment doesn't discriminate against anyone. And I mean anyone. I don't care who you are. You could be a Democrat for all I care and become a gun owner, but I don't know very many Democrats that are. But if you're one of them, I respect you. But just do yourself a favor, fix your party, please. That's all I ask of you. But here's the thing. In the past, I have been a supporter, and I helped out with the pink pistols back in the early 2000s when, at the time when then San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom proposed Proposition H, which disallowed handguns in San Francisco, which is totally unconstitutional. However, the Pink Pistols, which is a gay gun rights organization in San Francisco, they're known to be centrist Democrats. But because it's their constitutional right, I will stand up for them. Now, personally, I may not approve of the gay lifestyle. But what they do behind closed doors is their business, not mine. As long as they keep it to themselves and they don't bring me into it, I'll get along with them just fine. In fact, I even have a friend of mine who's gay. He's a cool guy, doesn't do anything to me, doesn't do anything to anybody. He just keeps to himself. Him and his partner just keep to themselves, and they don't bring their personal life into everybody's business. They just keep to themselves. And again, I don't have an issue with the gay community. The only issue I do have is when they indoctrinate themselves and they want to bring everybody into their personal lives. I don't need to know if you're gay. It's not my business. You don't need to tell anybody. I don't like the fact that they like to indoctrinate their gay weddings on national television. I mean, who cares? But putting that aside, because gay people are Americans, they should have the same constitutional rights as a straight person when it comes to the Second Amendment. Gay marriage, I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole different story, and I'm not going to get into it. But I'm going to focus on what I fight for, and that is for Second Amendment rights. It is true that gay people are human beings, just like everybody else, and they should have a right to defend themselves because, again, gay people are more than likely to be a target to hate crimes. And so, therefore, they should have a right to protect themselves. And the Pink Pistols' motto is gays with guns won't be bashed. And I strongly support a gay person's right to carry a firearm because they're more than likely be a target of hate crime by people who want to do harm. And therefore, they should have a right to be protect themselves. And I will stand and I will support them on that. I may not agree with their lifestyle, and I may not want to live the same kind of lifestyle that they live, but what they do behind closed doors is their business, not mine, so I don't care. All I know is I'm straight, I love women, and I love guns, and I love women who love guns. But again, constitutional rights are constitutional rights, regardless of race, color, and creed. And as a activist and as a advocate, I have to stand by and stand up to the people whose rights are being violated to their Second Amendment rights. Because again, transgender people are human beings. Gay people are human beings. They're human beings just like everybody else. However, I do believe, and I honestly do believe, that being transgender is a mental disorder. Do I believe it is? It is. As far as being lost and confused. In other words, in my opinion, I think people who are transgender are simply lost and confused. They are uncomfortable of being a guy, or they're uncomfortable being a girl. But I honestly think that people who want to transform, they should get therapy. They should meet with a counselor. That's my opinion. And I don't wish any ill will towards transgender people. But we have to understand one thing. That Robin Westman and Audrey Hale, they simply were sick. They had mental issues. And it's not because they're transgender, it's just because they're simply mentally ill. Put aside the fact that they're transgender. They're simply mentally ill. That's who they are. They're simply mentally ill. Does that mean that every transgender person is mentally ill? I would say mentally ill emotionally, but not physically. There's a difference. I feel that transgender people are mentally ill emotionally. Physically, not all of them are. And when I say physically mentally ill, that means they have a tendency of being violent. and just snap and lose a temper if you say the wrong thing to them. And there are transgender people who are like that. Especially when I was going to Northern Arizona University, you say the wrong thing to a transgender person, they become a loose cannon. But there are some transgender people that I know who are just simply lost and confused. They just don't know what path to take. I believe that they need help. Do I believe they need help? Yes. I believe, in my opinion, that the Bible is the healing tool to help somebody who's lost and confused. But unfortunately, there are some transgender people who want to accuse Christians as being hateful people, and I'm not. I'm not hateful towards transgender people. But I do believe emotionally they're mentally ill on the emotion side. Now, somebody that's mentally ill on the emotion side should not disqualify them from owning a firearm. But a transgender person who is mentally ill physically, who is capable of having a violent temper and is capable of doing harm, should not. And as an advocate and as an activist, I want to make sure that law-abiding citizens own guns. We need to take guns away from those who are criminals, like the gangbangers, like the rapists, the human smugglers. We need to lock them up. And the problem is, it's not because we have too many guns. That's not the issue. The problem is the failed prosecutions. We have to understand, you have these activist district attorneys, one of them being George Gascon, who was voted out, thank God. They cut deals towards criminals. And then you have these liberal judges who give slap on the wrist to criminals and let them back out on the street. The reason why we have a problem with gun crimes is because failed prosecutions. Now, people will make the argument about how many people die from gun crimes, but how many of those were self-defenses? That's something that neither the Democrats or the Republicans are addressing. Mainly the Rhino Republicans. But out of all the crimes or shootings that's happened with firearms, how many of those were self-defense? How many of them were self-defense? Let's say out of 100%, how many of them were self-defense out of 100%? I would say probably approximately 70% out of 100 were self-defense. And the other 30% has happened in gun-free zones. And unfortunately, these Democrats, they think that gun-free zones somehow, some way are going to save people's lives, but they don't. It only encourages crime. See, when it comes to gun rights, and when it comes down to people's right to keep and bear arms, people should not be judged by being gay, straight, black, white, Asian, gay, straight, or whatever you are. Your sexual preference or your sexual orientation or your race or your religious belief or your political party should not disqualify you from owning a firearm, but you should only be disqualified unless you're a violent person. Now, as I pointed out, transgender people are mentally ill emotionally, but not physically. Emotionally, they're mentally ill. But are there some that are both mentally ill, both emotionally and physically? Yes. And as I just mentioned, Robin Westman and Audrey Hall are just two examples of that. That they're mentally ill, both mentally and physically. And it happens not just, and it can happen to anybody. You don't have to be transgender to be mentally ill, both emotionally and physically. It can happen to anyone. But the problem is, our elected officials want to point the blame on law-abiding citizens for a criminal's wrongdoing. And again, as an advocate and as an activist, I want to make sure that every law-abiding citizen should have a right to keep and bear arms. Unfortunately, the Democrats, and I'm not going to cut the Republicans any slack either, but you have the Rhino Republicans who do not interpret the Constitution the way it should be interpreted. When we say a well-regulated militia being necessary to secure a free state, that means you and I are the militia. When tyranny comes, rebellion is duty. In other words, when our forefathers started this country, they became a militia to stand up against the King of England and his redcoats. Then it says, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's including semi-auto weapons, that's including machine guns. They should not be infringed upon. No constitutional right should be infringed upon. And our Supreme Court made it clear both in the Dick Hellard versus Washington, D.C. and McDonald versus Chicago. They both argued that you do not infringe upon a constitutional right. Well, that is it for today for 2A Arsenal Roundup News. If you have any important legislation that's going on in your state and you want me to know about it, please feel free to send me an email at rjespinoza, that's rjespinoza .roundupnews@gmail.com. Tell me what state you are from. Tell me what the legislation is about. Is it good? Is it bad? Will it benefit your Second Amendment rights, or will it cause and affect your Second Amendment rights? Feel free to send me an email, explain it to me. I'll look it up, and I will sure to address it in our next podcast. Remember, we're all in this together. So any way you can help me, I can help you in return. Help me help you bring the word out. That's what I'm here for, both as your advocate and an activist. Well, until then, be armed, be free, be vigilant, protect your home and your community, because that's what the Second Amendment is all about. Have a great day.